Good afternoon, folks. Billboard Chart Guy here, and happy to bring you another episode of BBCG and Friends. This time, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is covers, and we're going to specifically dive into some 70s, 80s, and 90s covers. And nobody better to do this with than my friend Melissa Gorman. Melissa, thank you, and welcome to the show again.
Thank you. It's so nice to be back here.
You are becoming quite the regular here. This is episode 3 for you, so thank you for doing it.
Love it. I love
Good
jamming music with you. So
thank you. So this is, I'm constantly making playlists and various topics, and one of the ones that I'm always working on are covers, and can never get this just right. I don't know how you feel, Melissa, but a lot of it is kind of on mood and what you've heard recently. So Melissa and I wanted to throw out some of our favorite covers from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s today. Subject to change for each of us as time moves on, but I thought it would be a fun little episode to do. Let's get started. So, ladies first, of course, my guest. Let's start in the fabulous 70s. And why don't you tell us 2 of your favorite covers from that decade?
of course, I think we would also be a little bit remiss if we didn't kind of set out some parameters here. We are specifically not covering any Bruce Springsteen covers, covers of his own material and his covers of other material, just so that you can leave that for you and Kirk to discuss.
Thank you for the reminder. Thank you.
Of course. And again, just the other caveat is these are not the greatest covers ever. These are just kind of personal opinions. And as you had mentioned, subject to change. So let's kick it off with the 70s. So my first one is Everlasting Love by Carl Carlton. It's just a great soul jam that was originally written by a couple of guys named Matt Graydon and Buzz Cason. And they had Robert Knight record it for them in 1967. And it originally peaked on the charts at number 13. But Carl Carlton came along and recorded it again in 1973 at actually a studio owned by one of the original authors of the song. And it was supposed to be a B-side to a song called I Want to Be Your Main Squeeze, which is an interesting title choice there. But it was issued as an A-side after a remix disco version started playing in the clubs and getting some traction there. So it's just a cool jam. It's a lot faster and more upbeat than kind of the slower original version by Robert Knight. And it's been covered a ton. So there's been over 14 covers of it. I can run through a couple of them. One is a band called Love Affair, which is a British-based band. And that cover was from the contemporary from when it was written in 67. Rex Smith and Rachel Sweet did one in 81. A notable one that I really also enjoy is the one that U2 did in 89, which was a B-side to All I Want Is You, All I Want Is You is also another great song. And then Gloria Estefan had a hit with it in 1995. It's just a fun jam. I can sing along with it anytime it comes on the radio or on a playlist I get going. So that's my first choice there.
That's a great one, and the Carl Carlson version is definitely has a disco vibe to it, correct?
Yeah.
I remember that well, and also I was gonna mention the U2 cover, which I love. It was like you said, the flip side to All I Want Is You, which was that Rattle and Hum?
It came off. I believe so. Yes.
Yep. Terrific version. Love the U2 version of it as well.
And then the second one that I had for the 70s is The First Cut is the Deepest, and that version by Rod Stewart. So that was originally written in the late 60s by Cat Stevens, who now goes by the moniker Yusuf Islam. And it wasn't originally recorded by him. It was recorded by somebody named P.P. Arnold, but he later recorded it and released it on his album New Masters sometime in 67. Rod Stewart did his version at the Muscle Shoals Sound Studio, and his was released in '77 on his "A Night on the Town" album, and it ultimately reached 21 on the Billboard charts. And he later included a version of this on his Unplugged and Seated album that he put out in '93. But even before Rod Stewart became kind of the cover machine that he's known for now and started doing all that American songbook stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of covers in the '80s. He did Downtown Train and Rhythm of My Heart, Have I Told You Lately, among some other stuff. But I really just like this version of that Rod does, because he's good. I think the way, his voice and tenor just lends to kind of the pain of the song overall. And there's been a couple other cool covers of it. There was a reggae version of it done in 1996 by a band called Papa D, which I'm not overly familiar with. And then Sheryl Crow did her version on her Greatest Hits album that she released.
Yeah, I remember her. Rod Stewart's such a unique vocalist. It's amazing. Is there anything specific about this song that you recall, like when it came out, or were you too young to
No, I
be
remember.
aware of it?
I remember when it came out. The reason I included it is because every time we go to Maine pretty frequently, and every time we drive up there, including for some of the Saco shows, my husband always has this on a playlist, and so I'm constantly reminded of this song every time we drive to Maine. So I think that's kind of why I included it as one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, the Faces were such a great band. I mean, the Black Crowes ripped off their whole vibe. But I love the Faces. I love early Rod Stewart, 70s Rod Stewart stuff. You noticed that. I'm sorry. I noticed that the next single after this one in his chronology was "You're in My Heart."
Yep.
Which is another interesting song. I think, isn't that about his soccer team that he owned or something?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
He always used to kick out soccer balls when he played live in the '70s.
That's
too.
right.
I don't know if he still does that anymore. He sounds not great anymore. And it's funny because we had a chance to decide whether we were going to go see Christopher Cross, Men at Work, and Toto, or see Rod Stewart, because they were playing the same night, like relatively locally. And my husband was trying to convince me that we should go see Rod Stewart, and I chose my hill to die on, and I said no, we're going to the other show, which we ended up going to. And he thanked me afterward, because Rod Stewart just does not sound good anymore.
I've seen clips. Yeah. Some of these guys are really struggling. First and foremost, David Lee Roth for sure.
Yep.
but yeah, I heard that as well with Rod. So these are two good ones for the '70s. There's so many to choose from. So as I was writing notes on this episode, Melissa, is what I realized is all of my songs are from Motown that
cool.
covered. So, and that was not done intentionally, but, so my first one for the '70s is Ain't Too Proud to Beg by the Rolling Stones. It's from their 1974 album, It's Only Rock and Roll. This was the second single from that album, and it did get to number 17 on the Hot 100. The Stones, well, originally this song was done by the Temptations in 1966, and it peaked at number 13. The Stones are famous for doing tons of covers. Actually, their first single was a Beatles song. Their first hit was I Want to Be Your Man. They've also done covers by Howlin' Wolf, Little Red Rooster. They did another Temptations song in '78, Just My Imagination. Chuck Berry, they recorded Around and Around, and Not Fade Away by Buddy Holly and the Crickets. So they're always doing covers, and there's many more I could have listed. This is a classic Motown song that, in my opinion, they made sound very Stonesy, which I just love the grit and just kind of the down and dirty sound that they had in the early to mid '70s. What I did not know in looking at the details on this song, Billy Preston played on piano. who had some hits maybe the following year with Nothing from Nothing and Gonna Go Round in Circles. This was the last album that Mick Taylor played guitar on, and he was replaced by Ronnie Wood in 75. So he is still the new guy in the Rolling Stones 50 something years later. Um, yeah, so this cover has always been a favorite of mine, and when we kind of thought about this topic, I definitely wanted to throw that out there. Do you like this one? Are you familiar with this cover?
I am, and it's interesting. I didn't realize that Billy Preston had played on it. So Billy Preston was with the Stones and the Beatles. So good on him for getting some good gigs that way. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
he
a really
played.
good version, and it always gets people up dancing. It's a good cover song.
Yeah, Billy Preston played with tons of people. Yeah, it's I've looked at that list in the past, and it's incredible. He was so talented, and he made that Let It Be album. You know, when
Yep.
he came into the sessions halfway through and just changed the whole vibe and everything of that session. But so Ain't Too Proud to Beg is number one. The second one we're going to 1979 for, and this was the first single from one of my favorite all-time bands, the English Beat, and this was Tears of a Clown. Um, it was originally done by Smokey Robinson and the Miracles in 1967. Stevie Wonder co-wrote this with Smokey Robinson, which I thought was cool. So for those of you not familiar with the English Beat, they are in my opinion, a great ska band.
Yep.
They were very influential in the late 70s, early 80s. A band that had a lot of fans in, other bands were very liked working with them. So, for example, they toured with David Bowie, The Clash, The Police, The Pretenders, REM, and Talking Heads. So, really big bands of the early 80s that the English Beat opened up for. They were called the Beat in the UK, but there were some legalities that in the United States they needed to be called the English Beat. I'm drawing a blank now on exactly what that was, but they only lasted the original lineup until 1983. They then split up. The two singers, Ranking Roger and Dave Wakeling, went to form General Public, which had a
Love
couple
General
of
Public. Yep.
great. Tenderness is an all-time 80s song for sure. And they had a couple of other songs. And then the I believe the guitar and the bass player joined up with Roland Gift and started up Fine Young Cannibals, who
Yep.
had a monster album, I think, in '88, The Ron the Cook. And they do a great cover of
Suspicious
Suspicious
Minds.
Minds.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So the English Beat fostered two other bands, and they still tour in some capacity. I think Dave Wakeling kind of leads it. Ranking Roger, unfortunately, passed away a few years ago, so he's not there. But it's a fun night out. They do all the hits, and just love the English Beat. Great. If you haven't listened, I recommend them highly.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of them, and they all are sort of incestuous, like kind of related to the Specials and that whole ska scene that was going on in Great Britain in the late '70s, early '80s.
Yes, yes, and they do a great. There's a great episode of remember that show on VH1, Bands Reunite.
Yes.
There's an episode with these guys, and 9 out of 10 times the bands reunite. In this case, they did not reunite, which is very sad. So,
That's too bad.
yes, but of course now they're together in one format. I think it's just like I said, Dave Wakeling with other musicians. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a great
so
choice.
thank you. Yeah, so those are my 70s. Any do you have any 70s like kind of runners up or
Yeah, so I have a couple of honorable mentions. one of them, I have actually three. One of them is Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Suede.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to say it. That was originally done by BJ Thomas. That was used in Reservoir Dogs. That was kind of my first introduction to that song. And it's hokey with the whole ooga chaka stuff, but I love it. I listen to that all the time still. Love Hurts by Nazareth, which was, I never realized that this was a cover of the Everly Brothers. And so I went back and listened to the Everly Brothers version. It's a very milk toast, unoffensive, mild song, as opposed to kind of the backbreaking soul heartbreak you hear in the Love Hurts version that Nazareth does. So I've always been a fan of that song. And then I can't not mention covers of the 70s without mentioning Van Halen's You Got Me. You Really Got Me, which is a cover of the Kinks, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay tuned for more Van Halen on this list, by the way.
Woo!
My major, I had it on, but then I pulled it off instead of and replaced it with Tears of a Clown. But I love the John Lennon version of Stand By Me from
Oh, yeah.
1975. It was he did an album called Rock and Roll. It was just covers. I think it was kind of to fulfill a contractual obligation with the record company, because then he went silent for 5 years before Double Fantasy. But it's a great cover of the Benny King song "Stand By Me." Love it, love it. So that
Yeah,
would have been
that's a good version.
that's my honorable mention. So let's move in and frizz up your hair, Melissa, and let's hear you talk about the '80s.
All right. I'm also going to caveat this decade by saying there's a lot of really cool covers in the 80s, especially one hit wonder songs. So, like, narrowing this down to two was tough. It's like picking your favorite child and whatnot. So, my first one is Every Time You Go Away by Paul Young. This was recorded by him in 1985, and it was originally written by Daryl Hall and recorded by Hall and Oates on for their 1980 Voices album, which interestingly enough also contained a cover of their own where they covered You've Lost That Love and Feeling, um,
Right?
which didn't really hit all that well because I think it was probably overshadowed by Kiss on My List and Make My Dreams, which were also on that album. Um, and there, Paul Young and Hall and Oates are kind of like two sides of the same blue-eyed soul coin, if you will. So it made sense for Paul Young to cover it. So he recorded his version in 1984 and released it on his 1985 album, The Secret of Association. And it was played at Live Aid and it reached number one on the Billboard chart 2 weeks later. John Hughes wanted to use this song in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and he wanted Paul Young's version originally, but his record label wouldn't allow for it. So there was a cover done by a group it was a guy, a group called Blue Room, which I've never heard of.
No, me neither.
So John Hughes ended up using that version for the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles soundtrack. But interestingly enough, Paul Young really wanted to include his version on it, but just wouldn't get the go ahead from the label. This song's also been covered a couple different times by other people, most recently by Cynthia Erivo of Wicked fame. She covered it for the I Like Me documentary about John Candy that just dropped a couple weeks ago. It's a very kind of slow, sad version of it. And another kind of call out here is Paul Young's album also had a cover version of Love of the Common People, which was later covered by Springsteen for Live in Dublin.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So that was my first one.
Okay.
And
I like,
and my
yeah, he was great, and he was on didn't he perform on Do They Know It's Christmas After All?
Yep, he's on
Yep.
there.
Yep.
He's
Yeah,
great.
he was good. Yeah, great voice.
And then my second one is Hazy Shade of Winter, the cover of the Bangles did. Most people know that this song was written by Paul Simon, and it was released by Simon and Garfunkel, obviously, as a standalone single in 1966. But then later on in 1968, they included it on their Bookends album. and their version peaked on Billboard at number 13. And the Bangles had been performing it live for a few years, actually since 1982. Um, and they recorded this version of it when they were approached for a song for the 1987 movie Less Than Zero. So the song made it onto that soundtrack. It was never released on kind of a contemporary album at the time that the Bangles had, but they later released it on their Greatest Hits album in 1990. And their version peaked at number 2. Um, it was covered again there in 2019 by Gerald Way for the Netflix series Umbrella Academy. But the Bangles version's been used a bunch of times in some mini series and other things, like it's in Stranger Things. It was in American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace. It was in Lucifer and Paper Girls. So it's just a very kind of jam version of the Simon and Garfunkel song. It's got a harder edge to it. It's a little bit more kind of rocking than kind of their folky version of that they put out back in the 60s.
Yeah.
So
I
good song.
I love the Bangles, and I don't think they've gotten the acclaim. Like again, I talk a lot about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Go-Go's are in, but the Bangles are not. I mean, if to me the Bangles are a better band with more longevity. The other thing, and I'm sure you know it, but have you ever dipped into any of the covers albums that Susanna Hoff did with Matthew Sweet?
No, I have not.
Okay, so go on to Apple Music and just put in her name and his name. They do, I think they have like 3 or 4 covers albums. And
okay, cool.
they do old Beatles songs and, just a variety of songs. I love her voice. She's amazing. That her eye roll and Walk Like an Egyptian,
Yep.
Hooked me in whatever year that was. But she's just so talented, and her voice is still tremendous. But check that out. Since we're talking about covers, like I said, I think they did 3 or 4 albums, Matthew Sweet and Susanna Hoffs. Great. Well, 2 good choices. I'm not going to do it chronologically, so I'm going to go from start in 1989, and I wanted to mention Higher Ground by the Red Hot Chili Peppers from the Mother's Milk album. This got to number 11 on a chart called the Alternative Airplay, which used to be called Modern Rock Tracks. Higher Ground, for those who don't know, is a classic Stevie Wonder song. It was released in 1973. His version got to number 4 on the Hot 100. Such a great song. I love the Chili Peppers version. The bass is so up front in the mix, Melissa. I love Flea's. I love watching Flea play the bass. He's just so into it, and in this song in particular, his instrument is just so up front in the mix. Love the groove, and although it's a cover, it seems like it's a very important song to this band. When they were inducted in 2012 into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they played this song with all the other artists as kind of the all-star jam at the end of the Hall of Fame ceremonies, which it speaks to first of all, it's a great song, but second of all, they made it their own in a certain way. So Red Hot Chili Peppers, Higher Ground. They also did a few years later, I think it was 95 or 96, believe it or not, for the Beavis and Butthead soundtrack, they did a great version of Love Roller Coaster by the
I remember
Players. That. You do,
yeah.
Really, really funky cover, which is Love Roller Coaster is a great song from the 70s.
Yeah, it is.
So that Chili Peppers Higher Ground is my first choice. And the second one is we're going back to 1982, the album Diver Down and Dancing in the Street by Van
Nice.
Halen. So I could have picked Oh Pretty Woman, which is also on that album, but Dancing in the Street, it was co-written. It was co-written by Marvin Gaye, and Martha and the Vandellas had a hit. It got to number 2 in 1964. Um, so many folks have covered this song, whether it's the Kinks, the Dead, and famously or infamously, in my opinion, David Bowie and Mick Jagger did, did that version, which came out right around Live Aid. Um, Van Halen was so much fun at this point. This, I would describe this, I don't know if you agree, but kind of like pop metal disco.
Oh
Um,
yeah, just that build up of the intro of the song with kind of
yeah,
that
it
jamming
might
guitar
be,
getting things started.
yeah, it might be Alex Van Halen's finest moment. If you go back and listen to it, the drums in the very, very beginning of the tune. It got to number 38 on the Hot 182. And I just and I'm not the biggest Van Halen guy. I appreciate them and know all the popular songs, and I think that some serious Van Halen fans look down on this album a little bit.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so.
yeah, but I loved it. I
That
loved it.
that album
So,
was my introduction to Van Halen, and then I subsequently went back to kind of some of their earlier stuff. But so great choice there. Yeah.
yep, yep, really. Uh, it's a fun song. What else did you have in the '80s that you narrowed down?
Let me see. I also had um this is let me in no chronological order. Um the Rolling Stones had a really good song called I'm Free, and it was covered by the Soup Dragons in the late 80s. It's probably no one's probably ever heard of it, but it's a really great fun version.
Yeah, that's a great song.
So if you haven't listened to that version, I'd recommend checking it out. It brings me back to the clubbing days of my early 20s. So I had to throw that in there. I also put in I Want Candy by Bow Wow Wow. They were an interesting band that were kind of under the tutelage of Malcolm McLaren, but that song was originally done by the Strangeloves in the 60s, and it's a very kind of simple bubblegummy song, but it's got a great hook. And then my last one is Come On Feel the Noise, which was covered by Quiet Riot in the 80s. And that was originally done by Slade, but that's also kind of a good driving song, good running song.
Yeah, yep, quite right. What year was that? Like, was that like 83, 84, something like that?
Yeah, I think it was 83.
Yeah. Um, I didn't write some honorable mentions for the '80s, so we'll move on. There was so many. You're right, because the '80s were the most difficult one for me to narrow down. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I could have had 10 selections and I'd still be going. So
yeah. I mean, you could just say "Nothing Compares to You" by Sinead O'Connor, right? And that
yep.
that could cover it. Originally written by Prince. But yeah, great decade. Way too many to choose from. All right, we're up to the '90s. I still had
All right,
hair
here we
in the
go.
'90s. I still had hair in the '90s. So let's imagine that and tell me your two songs.
Um, Again, just to call out here, with the advent of kind of sampling and all of the different kinds of reformatting of music, this is where kind of the line between covers and sampling and all that jazz starts to come in. But my first one is Now That We Found Love. This was originally written by the Philly duo of Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff for the OJs back in 1973. This was included on the OJs album called Ship Ahoy, which was the album that had Backstabbers on it. Um, there was a reggae version released by a group called Third World in 1978 that was kind of a low key hit on the charts. But then Heavy D and the Boys version that features Aaron Hall was released in 1991. And that version kind of fused the original OJ's version with some of the lyrics and the funky freestyle elements from the reggae version. Um, and that version from Heavy D and the Boys peaked at number 11 on the Billboard chart. And it's just a great wedding function song. It's a song that gets everybody up and moving if they're kind of a little reluctant to get the party started. So that's why I included that one.
I love that song. That's one of my favorite kind of hip hop. Heavy D was tremendous. Um, I love that whole bit at the end. He's like Brooklyn, Bronx, Queen, Manhattan, the whole New York City. I love it. And you don't stop, and you don't quit. Right? That I love that. Love Heavy D.
Yeah, it was.
He had a few hits. He definitely did. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank right now, but he had a couple other hits.
Yeah, so it's just a fun song. And I until I started kind of looking into what I wanted to choose for the 80s, I didn't really know that this was a cover. I wasn't familiar with the OJ's version, and I really like a lot of the OJ stuff, so it was cool to go back and listen to that. And the OJ's version is just very kind of slow, low key, 70s soul jam where, obviously the Heavy D and the boys really ramp it up to another level.
Great pick. Great pick.
And then my second pick, and I will preface this by saying this is a complete call out slash fan service for the now defunct Hits with Dave Cullinane.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but a song that was frequently requested and often played by Dave is Torn by Natalie Imbruglia. So again, I didn't realize that this was a cover either. It's got a little bit of an interesting history. It was written in 1991 by three different people, and it was written as a solo song for one of the artists, a woman named Anne Previn. And they recorded it and they played it live, but it wasn't released until 1993 when a Danish singer named Lise Sorensen released it in a version that was in her native language.
Yep.
And then later, the original authors of the song formed a band called Edna Swap, and they released the first English language version of the song in 95. And then there was a Norwegian version released the following year by somebody named Trine Rhine. And then finally, the Australian singer Natalie Imbruglia released her version, which is the best known version, in 1997 as her debut single. And a couple fun facts: this peaked at number 42 on Billboard's chart, which I thought was kind of low. I figured it might have been a
Yeah.
stronger show there. So fact check me on that, Kirk
Okay.
and Billboard chart guy, if that's incorrect. But she was nominated for a Grammy for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance, but ultimately lost to Celine Dion for My Heart Will Go On. And then in the 2000s, there was a Portuguese version of the song. So I don't know what's so great about this song that makes other like foreign language people want to cover it, but they did a Brazilian girl group called Rouge covered it in 2005. And then this song by Natalie Imbruglia was used in the TV series Charmed, and actually One Direction sang a version of it for their first performance as a group on the X Factor in 2010.
Huh. You were correct. Number 42 on the Billboard charts in 1997. That's where it peaked. So
Crazy. I
that
thought it
is a
would be a
surprise.
little higher than that.
Yeah, that video seemingly was on all the time on MTV.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What you
Um,
got?
well, yeah. Well, the first thing is I didn't realize that was a cover either. So interesting. So I got two kind of kooky ones, but I'll go there again, keeping the back of your mind that all of these were R&B hits basically out of the Motown. Easy, the song Easy was recorded by Faith No More in 1992. It got to number 58 on the Hot 100. For my Australian listeners, it did get to number 1 down under. So Easy is a cover of a Commodores song from 1977, which charted at number 1 on the Hot Soul Singles and number 4 on the Hot 100, written by Lionel Richie. So this stood out to me then, and it stands out to me now, is because Faith No More didn't really register in my world until the song Epic hit the radio and hit MTV. That song got to number 8 in 1990. It was a real a unique song for the time. It was like a hard rock slash hip
Yeah.
hop tune. So that stood out to me. And I was like, boy, this is interesting. And again, nothing I would normally listen to, but like I said, it was a hit. The video was a little unique, so it kind of stuck in my mind, and I was always wondering what these guys would do next. And then fast forward 2 years later, and they're doing a Commodore's cover, which, if you listen to it, their version is very, very true to the original, right up until the middle of the song where they do there's a massive guitar solo, which kind of takes it up a notch to typical Faith No More, I guess I would say. Yeah, so a little bit off the beaten path, but I love this song, Easy by Faith No More. So that's number one.
Did you ever
You,
hear their song called We Care a Lot? I remember that being a Faith No More song from like the middle 80s, but I do remember Epic coming out when I was in college.
yeah,
Um,
I don't remember that other song. No, not at all. Yeah.
huh.
Um, my last song is Sexual Healing by Soul Asylum. And I've talked about this song on the show with a couple of guests. This was recorded in 1993. There was a compilation album put together called No Alternative, and it was a charity dedicated to raising money for and awareness for AIDS relief. Uh, Many of the kind of the alternative slash grunge bands of the eras contributed songs, such as The Breeders, Nirvana, Sonic Youth, Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins, Pavement, Goo Goo Dolls, and Soul Asylum. They do an incredible, in my opinion, version of Sexual Healing. Again, the groove to me is it just it hooked me right away. I mentioned the Stones turning "Ain't Too Proud to Beg" into a very Stonesy song. I would say that this performance is a very Stonesy performance as well. It's very loose, but it's got a great groove. Um,
Yep, it does.
it's it hit number 10 on the alternative airplay charts. And for those not familiar with Soul Asylum, they had hits such as Runaway Train, Somebody to Shove, Black Gold, and Misery. Um, they peaked probably 93, 94, 95, and then they've kind of
Vanished from the
um,
planet.
vanished from the planet. They are still around, believe it or not, and they still perform. Dave Pirner is the lead singer. And yeah, so they're still out there. But again, from the moment I heard this song in 1993 or 1994, I fell in love with it, and I love the version. Didn't really love Marvin Gaye's version, which peaked at number 3 in 1981, but the Soul Asylum version really hooked me.
Yeah, I had never heard the Soul Asylum version until you started talking about it on the shows, and so I went back and listened to it. It is a really cool version. I actually like both versions. Sexual Healing was kind of my introduction to um, Marvin Gaye, so have like a fond place in my heart for that song. And it
Right.
was just sad what ended up happening to him. But Soul Asylum does a really cool interpretation of it.
Yeah, and it's weird, Melissa. I went just this morning just to double check a couple of things, and I was looking and I listened to the song again, and the album No Alternative is on Apple Music, but you can only listen to 2 of the songs.
I hate
Um,
when they do that.
yeah, so do I. But luckily for me and us, uh, uh, Sexual
It
Healing
was
is
one of
one of the
them.
songs. Yeah, so yeah, so great. I had this CD. I probably still have it in a box on top of my attic somewhere. But yeah, love this version. So yeah, so that's our 70s, 80s, and 90s. Do you have a couple of other 90s you wanted to mention or anything else before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I gave a couple of honorable mentions for the 90s. To my first one is Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon by Urge Overkill. That was used on the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, with the
Yeah.
original being done in the 60s by Neil Diamond. That's a cool version. Um, the kind of sky upbeat version of Come On Eileen by Save Ferris is a cover of obviously the Dexy Midnight Runners one hit wonder from earlier in the 80s. And then There She Goes by Sixpence None the Richer. They covered the Laws version of that song. And I like both versions of those songs. They're relatively similar, but it's just a sweet song.
Yeah, the lead singer of that band has a beautiful voice.
Yeah, she does.
Um, the one I'll call out is let me just make sure it's in the Wild Night by John Mellencamp. I love that. Um,
Yeah, and I
and
can't say the
then
woman's last name that does the duet with him. It's Michelle.
it's Michelle something. Yes.
It's Negaticello or something.
Yes.
That's as
And
close as
the
I'm going to get to it.
and the other one I seeked out, but I couldn't find it, and maybe it was just I heard of maybe a performance on radio or something. Was the Stone Temple Pilots did a version of Misty Mountain Hop by
Oh, really?
Led Zeppelin, and I could have sworn like they did it unplugged, and I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. I bet if you go on YouTube, um, you'll find it. It's incredible. I love it. Love. I love Misty Mountain Hop to begin with. That might have been my first Led Zeppelin song that I loved, but this version's very good too.
Oh, cool. I'll have to dig that up and see if I can find it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. It's nice to be a repeat customer here.
You could shop here anytime you'd like. And I want to thank my friend Menners and, of course, Kirk and the Minifan Network for allowing us to do this. And I want to also say, if anybody has some other ideas for other covers, this is kind of a subject that I think, and Melissa, agree with me or disagree with me, I think we could do this again, whether we have another person or me and you do it, but there's so many cover songs.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to get introduced to new music that you might not have even known about or heard of. And if you have a favorite song that is done by somebody else, it's just a really good way to have alternate interpretations of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.